The metal walls of the detention cell were cold against Kate Miller's back as she sat on the hard bench. Her blue uniform was dirty and torn from the battle 3 days ago. The name tag on her chest read K. Miller, but all the rank patches had been removed by her captors. To anyone looking at her, she appeared to be just another captured human soldier. Around her, 23 other prisoners sat in similar cells. The Zephyrian warship called the Dawn of Victory held them all in its belly like a giant metal beast. Kate could hear the low hum of the alien engines through the thick walls. They were traveling fast through space, heading toward the Zephyrian homeworlds. The aliens who captured them looked like walking lizards, but much bigger than any lizard on Earth. They stood 7 feet tall with thick, scaly skin that shined like green metal. Their eyes glowed yellow like burning coals, and they wore black armor that covered most of their bodies. They called themselves the Zephyrian Empire, and they had been attacking human colonies for 8 months. Kate watched as 2 Zephyrian guards walked past her cell. Their boots made heavy clicking sounds on the metal floor. They spoke to each other in their own language, which sounded like a mix of hissing and clicking noises. Kate understood every word they said, but she kept her face blank and stared at the floor like a defeated prisoner. "The human creatures are weak," said the first guard. "They broke so easily in battle." "Yes," replied the second guard. "General Vextar says we will question them soon. They will tell us where their homeworld keeps its fighting ships." Kate's heart beat faster, but she did not move. The guards had no idea she could understand them. This was exactly what she had hoped for. In the cell across from her, Marine Sergeant Alex Johnson was pacing back and forth. He was a big man with short brown hair and angry eyes. His uniform also had the rank patches torn off. Alex kept hitting his fist against the wall, making dull thumping sounds. "Damn lizards," Alex said quietly. "If I could get my hands on just one of them." "Keep your voice down," said Lisa Parker from the cell next to Kate. Lisa was a young woman with blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She had been a Navy pilot before their capture. They might understand English. Kate knew that some of the Zephyrians did speak English, but not very well. She had studied their language and culture for 2 years before this mission. Few humans knew as much about the enemy as she did. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the prisoner area. Kate looked up to see a large Zephyrian approaching. This one was different from the guards. His armor was decorated with silver markings, and his yellow eyes seemed brighter and more intelligent. A long scar ran down the left side of his scaly face. This was General Vextar, the commander of the Zephyrian fleet. Kate had seen his picture in intelligence reports back on Earth. He was known for being smart and cruel. The general stopped in front of the prisoner cells and looked at each human with cold, calculating eyes. "Humans," the general said in broken English, "you are now prisoners of the great Zephyrian Empire. You will answer questions about your military forces. Those who cooperate will be treated well. Those who do not..." He let the threat hang in the air. Several prisoners looked frightened. Ryan Davis, a Marine captain, stood up straight and stared back at the general with defiance. Kate admired his courage, but she remained sitting and kept her eyes down. General Vextar walked slowly along the row of cells, studying each prisoner. When he reached Kate's cell, he barely glanced at her. She was smaller than most of the other prisoners, and without her rank insignia, she looked like she might be a technician or support staff. "We will begin questioning tomorrow," the general announced. "We will start with the lowest-ranking prisoners first. They usually break the fastest." Kate almost smiled at this, but she kept her face neutral. The Zephyrians clearly did not understand human military structure. They thought that lower-ranking soldiers would have less training to resist interrogation. In reality, it was often the opposite. After the general left, the prisoners began talking quietly among themselves. Kate listened but said very little. She learned that most of them were from the transport ship New Hope, which had been attacked while carrying supplies to the colony on Kepler 442b. The battle had been fierce, but short. The human ships were outnumbered 5-1. What the other prisoners did not know was that Kate had not been on the New Hope by accident. She had specifically requested transfer to that ship, because intelligence reports suggested it would be attacked. Her mission was to get captured and learn about Zephyrian capabilities from the inside. As night fell on the ship, the lights in the prisoner area dimmed. Kate lay down on the hard bench that served as her bed. Around her, she could hear other prisoners shifting uncomfortably or whispering to each other. Kate began reviewing everything she had observed so far. The ship's layout, the number of guards, their weapons, and most importantly, their attitudes toward humans. The Zephyrians clearly thought of humans as an inferior species. They were confident, maybe too confident. She had also noticed things about the ship's design that might be useful later. The ventilation system seemed to have large ducts that could fit a human. The guard rotations changed every 6 hours, and there was always a 15-minute gap when the shifts overlapped and the guards were distracted. But Kate's most important discovery was how freely the Zephyrians talked around the prisoners. They discussed ship operations, military plans, and tactical information, as if the humans could not understand. This gave Kate access to intelligence that would normally be impossible to obtain. Through the wall, she could hear Alex Johnson still muttering angrily to himself. Lisa Parker was quietly crying, thinking about friends who had died in the battle. Ryan Davis was probably planning some kind of hopeless escape attempt. Kate felt sorry for her fellow prisoners, but she could not reveal her true mission to them. If they knew who she really was, they might act differently and give away the deception. For now, she had to let them think she was just another captured soldier. Tomorrow, the interrogations would begin. Kate would have to be very careful to maintain her cover while gathering as much information as possible. The fate of Earth itself might depend on what she learned during her time as a prisoner. She closed her eyes and tried to rest, knowing that the most dangerous part of her mission was about to begin. The next morning came too early for most of the prisoners. Kate had slept only a few hours, but her mind was sharp and alert. She had trained for situations like this, during her years at the Naval Academy and later, at the Special Operations Command School. The first prisoner to be taken for questioning was a young man named Danny Walsh. He had been a supply clerk on the New Hope and looked terrified as 2 Zephyrian guards dragged him from his cell. His hands were shaking and Kate could see sweat on his face even though the ship was cold. "It will be okay, Danny," called out Lisa Parker as he was led away. "Just tell them your name and rank. Nothing else." Kate watched the guards take Danny down a long corridor that led deeper into the ship. She memorized every detail of their route, counting steps and noting doorways. Information like this might be crucial later. 2 hours passed before Danny was brought back. He looked exhausted and scared, but he did not appear to have been physically hurt. The Zephyrians seemed to prefer psychological pressure over torture. Danny was pushed back into his cell and immediately curled up on his bench, refusing to talk to anyone. The next prisoner taken was a young woman named Beth Collins, who had been a communications officer. She was gone for 3 hours. When she returned, she was crying softly but also seemed unharmed physically. Kate began to understand the Zephyrian interrogation strategy. They were starting with prisoners they thought were lowest ranking and least trained to resist questioning. They probably hoped to get basic information first, then use that to pressure higher-ranking prisoners later. During the interrogations, Kate continued to listen to the guards talking among themselves. She learned that the ship was part of a larger fleet heading toward the inner colonies, where several major human settlements were located. The Zephyrians planned to attack these colonies within the next 2 weeks. She also discovered something more disturbing. The aliens had seriously underestimated human military capabilities. They thought Earth's defense fleets were small and poorly organized. They had no idea about the new ships being built in secret shipyards around Jupiter and Saturn. "The human homeworld has perhaps 50 fighting ships," she heard one guard tell another. "We have already destroyed most of their outer defenses." Kate knew this was completely wrong. Earth's fleet numbered in the hundreds and new ships were being completed every month. But the Zephyrians were basing their intelligence on outdated information and their own prejudices about human technology. On the second day, the guards came for Alex Johnson. The big Marine sergeant looked ready to fight, but Lisa Parker grabbed his arm. "Don't give them a reason to hurt you," she said quietly. "We need you alive." Alex nodded and walked out with the guards without resistance. Kate respected his self-control. It would have been easy for him to lash out, but that would only make things worse for everyone. Alex was gone for 4 hours. When he came back, he had a black eye and a cut on his lip, but he was grinning. "Bastards got nothing from me," he said proudly. "I told them my name, rank, and serial number about 100 times. They got so frustrated that one of them hit me." He touched his swollen eye gingerly, worth it to see the look on his ugly face. Kate was impressed by Alex's resistance, but she also worried that the Zephyrians might start using more serious methods if prisoners continued to refuse cooperation. Her concerns proved correct when Ryan Davis was taken for questioning on the third day. The Marine captain was gone for 6 hours, and when he returned, it was clear that the aliens had tried much harder to break him. He had bruises on his arms and face, and he moved like someone who had been hit in the stomach several times, but Ryan had given them nothing useful either. He sat in his cell afterward, straight-backed and defiant despite his injuries. They asked about fleet positions and defense plans. He told the other prisoners quietly, "I told them I was just a Marine. Marines don't know about Navy operations." This was smart, Kate thought. Ryan was using the Zephyrians' lack of understanding about human military structure against them. They probably believed that Marines and Navy personnel were completely separate and did not share information. As the interrogations continued, Kate noticed patterns in the guards' behavior and the ship's operations. She learned that General Vextar personally oversaw the questioning of prisoners he considered important. Lower-ranking aliens handled what they thought were less valuable captives. She also discovered that the Zephyrians became increasingly frustrated with each failed interrogation. They had expected humans to break easily under pressure. The continued resistance was making them doubt their own intelligence about human psychology and military training. Kate realized that this frustration could be used to her advantage. The more confident the aliens became that humans were weak and easily broken, the more likely they were to make mistakes. On the fourth day, it was Lisa Parker's turn. The young pilot was visibly nervous as the guards approached her cell. She had been trying to stay strong for the other prisoners, but Kate could see the fear in her eyes. "Remember what Captain Davis said," Kate told her quietly as the guards opened the cell. "You're just a pilot. You don't know about big-picture military stuff." Lisa nodded and tried to smile. "Thanks, I'll be okay." Kate watched her being led away and felt a pang of guilt. She wanted to help these brave people, but revealing her true identity too early would ruin everything. She had to wait for the right moment. While Lisa was gone, Kate overheard a conversation between two guards that made her blood run cold. They were discussing plans for the next phase of the war. The Zephyrian fleet was not just planning to attack the inner colonies. They intended to move on to Earth itself within a month. "Once we crush their remaining ships, the human homeworld will surrender," one guard said confidently. "General Vextar says their species lacks the courage for a long fight." Kate clenched her fists but kept her expression neutral. The aliens' arrogance was astounding. They had no idea what humans were capable of when fighting for their home and families. When Lisa returned from her interrogation, she looked shaken but determined. "They kept asking about fighter tactics and squadron organization," she whispered to Kate. "I told them I only knew how to fly my own ship." That evening, as the prisoners settled in for another uncomfortable night, Kate heard one of the guards mention her name on the duty roster. Tomorrow would be her turn for questioning. Kate felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This would be her first real test. She had to appear cooperative enough to avoid suspicion, but not so helpful that she actually aided the enemy. Most importantly, she had to continue gathering intelligence while maintaining her cover as a low-ranking prisoner. The success of her mission, and possibly the survival of humanity, depended on her performance in that interrogation room. As she lay on the hard bench, Kate went over her story one more time, preparing for the most important acting job of her life. Kate's turn came on the 5th day of their captivity. She had been watching and learning from every interrogation before hers, noting how the Zephyrians approached different types of prisoners. When the guards came to her cell, she made sure to look nervous and uncertain, like someone who had never been in combat before. The guards barely looked at her as they opened the cell door. She was small compared to the Marines and other military personnel, and without rank insignia, she appeared to be exactly what she wanted them to think. A low-level technician who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Come, human," said one of the guards in broken English. His voice carried the typical Zephyrian arrogance that Kate had observed over the past few days. Kate stood up slowly, making her movements hesitant and fearful. She kept her eyes down as they led her through the ship's corridors. But while she appeared submissive, her mind was working rapidly, mapping every turn, counting doorways, and noting security features. The interrogation room was smaller than she had expected. It contained only a metal table, 2 chairs, and several monitoring devices that she did not recognize. The walls were bare except for what appeared to be recording equipment. A single bright light hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. The Zephyrian waiting for her was not General Vextar, as Kate had expected. Instead, it was a smaller alien with darker green scales and silver markings on his armor that indicated middle rank. This was Commander Thexnall, according to the name patch on his uniform. "Sit down, human," Commander Thexnall said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His English was better than the guard's, but still heavily accented. Kate sat down carefully, keeping her posture nervous and uncertain. She clasped her hands together in her lap and continued to avoid eye contact, playing the role of a frightened prisoner perfectly. "What is your name and position?" the commander asked, pulling out a tablet device to record her answers. "Kate Miller," she replied quietly. I was working in the ship's computer systems, maintenance and repairs." This was partly true. Kate was highly skilled with computer systems, though her real expertise was in military intelligence and xenolinguistics, not basic maintenance. "You were on the transport ship when we attacked?" "Yes, sir," Kate said, making her voice shake slightly. "I was just trying to keep the computers running. I never wanted to fight anyone." Commander Thexenol seemed satisfied with this response. Like the other Zephyrians, he clearly believed that human females were naturally less aggressive and less likely to be involved in military operations. "Tell me about the ship's computer systems," he continued. "What kind of security did they have?" Kate saw an opportunity. She began describing the computer systems in detail, but the information she gave was carefully crafted to be misleading. She made the human systems sound much more primitive than they actually were, while also planting false information about security protocols and data storage. "The main computer core was really old," she said, still maintaining her nervous tone. "We had trouble with it breaking down all the time. The security wasn't very good either. Just basic password protection, nothing fancy." This was completely false. Human computer systems were actually more advanced than Zephyrian technology in many ways, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence and data encryption. But Kate wanted the aliens to underestimate human technological capabilities. Commander Thexnall made notes on his tablet and nodded approvingly. The information seemed to confirm what the Zephyrians already believed about human technology, being inferior to their own. "What about the ship's mission?" he asked. "Where were you going and why?" Kate had prepared for this question carefully. "We were taking supplies to one of the colonies," she said. "Food, medicine, basic equipment. I heard some of the crew talking about problems with growing crops there." Again, this contained just enough truth to be believable while avoiding any mention of the real cargo the new Hope had been carrying: advanced weapons components and military intelligence reports. The commander continued, questioning her for over an hour, asking about everything from ship layouts to crew numbers to cargo manifests. Kate answered each question in character, providing information that sounded helpful but was actually designed to mislead Zephyrian intelligence. She described fictional weaknesses in human ship designs, exaggerated the difficulty of human space travel, and made their military logistics sound chaotic and inefficient. All of this played into the Zephyrians' existing prejudices about human capabilities. But as the interrogation continued, Kate began to notice that Commander Thexnall was becoming more attentive to her answers. Her responses were too detailed and too consistent for someone who was supposedly just a computer technician. She was demonstrating knowledge about ship operations and military procedures that seemed inconsistent with her claimed role. "You seem to know a great deal about the ship's operations for a maintenance worker," the commander observed, his yellow eyes narrowing slightly. Kate felt a moment of concern but maintained her character. "I had to work with different departments when their computers broke down," she explained. "The engineers and navigation people were always calling me to fix things. You pick up information when you listen to people talk." This seemed to satisfy the commander for the moment, but Kate realized she needed to be more careful. Her extensive knowledge was both an asset and a potential liability. She had to provide enough useful-sounding information to maintain credibility, while not revealing the true extent of her expertise. The interrogation continued for another hour. Kate found herself walking a careful line between appearing cooperative and protecting vital information. She was also continuing to gather intelligence about Zephyrian operations by listening to the commander's questions and observing his reactions. She learned that the aliens were particularly interested in human industrial capabilities and the location of manufacturing facilities. They seemed to believe that destroying a few key installations would cripple human resistance entirely. Kate also noticed that Commander Thexnell received several interruptions during their session. Other Zephyrians would enter the room and speak to him in their own language. Kate understood every word, learning about ship operations, fleet movements, and strategic plans that the aliens never intended for her to hear. By the end of the session, Kate had gathered valuable intelligence while successfully maintaining her cover as a low-level prisoner. But she also sensed that the commander had become suspicious of her detailed knowledge and articulate responses. "You will return to your cell now," Commander Thexnell said finally. "But I think we will speak again soon. You seem to have interesting insights into human operations." As the guards escorted her back to the prisoner area, Kate realized that her careful balance was becoming harder to maintain. The commander was starting to suspect that she might be more than she appeared to be. When she reached her cell, the other prisoners looked at her with concern and curiosity. They had all been through their own interrogations and understood how stressful the experience could be. "Are you okay?" Lisa Parker asked quietly. "You were gone a long time." "I'm fine," Kate replied, sitting down on her bench. They just had a lot of questions about the computer systems. But privately, Kate knew that her mission was entering a more dangerous phase. Commander Thexnell's suspicions meant that her next interrogation would likely be much more intensive. She would have to be even more careful, or risk exposing not just her true identity, but the entire operation that depended on her success. 2 days passed before Kate was summoned for her second interrogation. During that time, she continued to observe and listen, gathering more intelligence about Zephyrian operations. She learned that the fleet was larger than human intelligence had estimated, but also that their supply lines were stretched thin across multiple star systems. When the guards came for her again, Kate noticed something different in their behavior. They were more alert, more cautious. Commander Thexnell had obviously shared his suspicions about her with others in the command structure. This time, they took her to a different room, larger with more security equipment and multiple recording devices. Kate's heart rate increased slightly, but she maintained her nervous, frightened persona as they secured her to the chair with metal restraints. She did not have to wait long to understand why the security had been increased. The door opened with a loud hiss and General Vextar himself entered the room, followed by Commander Thexnell and 2 elite guards in ceremonial armor. General Vextar was even more intimidating in person than Kate had expected. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with broad shoulders and arms that looked like they could crush a human without effort. The scar on his face was deeper than it had appeared from a distance, and his yellow eyes seemed to glow with inner fire. "So," the general said in English that was much better than his subordinates, "this is the human who knows so much about ship operations." Kate kept her eyes down and tried to look terrified, which was not entirely an act. Being in the same room with the most dangerous military commander in the Zephyrian Empire was genuinely frightening, even for someone with her training. "Please," she said in a small, shaking voice. "I just answered the questions. I don't know anything important." General Vextar walked slowly around her chair, studying her from different angles like a predator examining prey. "Commander Thexnell tells me you have remarkable knowledge for a simple technician. Knowledge about military procedures, ship operations, and strategic thinking." Kate realized that her careful answers during the previous interrogation had been too sophisticated. She had underestimated how closely the Zephyrians would analyze her responses. "I only know what I heard other people talking about," she said, maintaining her frightened tone. "I had to fix computers all over the ship. People talk when they think you're not important enough to matter." "Perhaps," the general said, stopping directly in front of her. "But your answers showed understanding of concepts that most humans in your supposed position would not grasp. You described defensive procedures with the insight of someone who has studied military tactics." Kate's mind raced. She needed to find a way to explain her knowledge without revealing her true identity. But the general was clearly much more intelligent than his subordinates. Simple lies would not work on him. I studied military history in school," she said hesitantly. "Before I became a technician. I always found it interesting. This was actually true." though it barely scratched the surface of her real education and training. General Vextar exchanged a look with Commander Thexanol, then gestured to one of the guards. "Bring the enhanced interrogation equipment." Kate felt a chill of fear. She had been hoping to avoid this moment, but it seemed the Zephyrians were no longer willing to rely on psychological pressure alone. "Wait," she said quickly. "What do you want to know?" "Maybe I can help more than I thought." The general held up a hand to stop the guard. "Now you offer to be more helpful? How convenient." His voice was filled with suspicion and cold amusement. Kate realized she was running out of time and options. Her cover was nearly blown. And once the Zephyrians began using physical interrogation methods, maintaining her deception would become much more difficult. She made a calculated decision to reveal partial truth in order to protect the larger secret. "Okay," she said, allowing her voice to become stronger and more confident. "I wasn't entirely honest before. I'm not just a technician." General Vextar's eyes narrowed with interest. "Continue." "I'm a naval intelligence analyst," Kate said, which was technically true, though it described only a small part of her real role. "I was on the transport ship to gather information about the EU colony's defensive capabilities." This explanation would account for her detailed knowledge while still maintaining the deception that she was a relatively low-ranking officer. "Commander." Thexno leaned forward eagerly. "What kind of intelligence were you gathering?" Kate began providing carefully crafted information about fictional defensive installations and imaginary fleet deployments. She described elaborate but non-existent plans for defending the inner colonies, painting a picture of human military capabilities that was impressive, enough to seem believable but contained strategic weaknesses that would actually benefit Earth's real defense plans. General Vextar listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that tested the consistency of her story. Kate had to think quickly to maintain the deception while providing information that seemed valuable but was actually misleading. "These defensive plans you describe," the general said after she had been talking for over an hour. "They show remarkable sophistication for a species we considered primitive. Perhaps we have underestimated human capabilities." Kate felt a moment of satisfaction. She was successfully planting doubts about Zephyrian intelligence while appearing to cooperate fully. But then the general asked a question that made her blood run cold. "If you are truly an intelligence analyst, then you would know about the human fleet positions around the outer rim worlds. Tell me about the ship stationed at Kepler 442b. Kate's heart pounded. She knew the real answer to this question, but giving it would reveal information that could get people killed. The human ships at Kepler 442b were part of a secret defensive network that the Zephyrians did not know about. I don't have that information," she said carefully. "My focus was on the colony itself, not fleet positions." General Vexitar's expression darkened. "Strange. An intelligence analyst who does not know about military deployments in her area of operation?" Kate realized she had made a mistake. Her refusal to answer had created more suspicion instead of less. The general gestured to his guards again. "Perhaps enhanced interrogation will refresh your memory." As the guards moved toward her with their equipment, Kate knew she had reached a critical decision point. She could continue trying to maintain her partial cover and risk having real intelligence extracted from her under torture, or she could make a much more dramatic revelation that would completely change the dynamics of the situation. The guards were attaching strange devices to the chair when Kate made her choice. "General Vextar," she said, and for the first time, her voice carried a tone of authority instead of fear. "I think you should reconsider your approach." The general paused, clearly surprised by the sudden change in her manner. Kate looked directly into his glowing yellow eyes for the first time since her capture. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, confident, and carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "There are things about this situation that you do not understand," she said, "and before you proceed with enhanced interrogation, you might want to consider who exactly you have captured." The interrogation room fell completely silent. General Vextar's eyes widened slightly as he realized that the frightened human prisoner had just spoken to him with the voice of a military commander. The silence in the interrogation room stretched for several long moments. General Vextar stared at Kate with a mixture of confusion and growing alarm, as he processed the complete transformation in her demeanor. The frightened, submissive prisoner had vanished, replaced by someone who radiated confidence and authority. "Guards, step back," the general ordered quietly, never taking his eyes off Kate. His instincts as a military commander were telling him that something fundamental had just changed, though he did not yet understand what. Kate straightened in her restraints, her entire posture shifting from that of a victim to someone in control of the situation. When she spoke again, it was in perfect Zephyrian, with the formal pronunciation and grammatical structures used only by highly educated members of their society. "General Vexitar of the 3rd Battle Fleet," she said, using his full military title and rank with flawless precision. "I believe it is time we had an honest conversation about your tactical situation." The effect on the Zephyrians was immediate and dramatic. Commander Thexnell stepped backward in shock, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. The guards' hands moved instinctively toward their weapons, uncertain how to respond to a prisoner who was suddenly speaking their language better than most of their own officers. General Vextar himself remained motionless for several seconds, his military mind racing to understand the implications of what he had just heard. No ordinary human could speak Zephyrian with such fluency and cultural understanding. This level of linguistic skill required years of intensive study and direct contact with their civilization. "Who are you?" he asked finally, also switching to Zephyrian. Kate smiled slightly, and for the first time since her capture, it was a genuine expression of confidence rather than a calculated act. "I am Admiral Catherine Miller," she said clearly, "Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Initiative's Special Operations Division. And you, General, have just provided me with exactly the intelligence I came here to gather." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Commander Thexnell actually staggered, and one of the guards made a choking sound of disbelief. General Vextar's scarred face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, understanding, and finally, grudging respect mixed with fury. "Impossible," Commander Thexnell stammered. "She was on a transport ship. A prisoner. A technician." "No," Kate said calmly. "I was on a carefully planned reconnaissance mission. The transport ship New Hope was selected precisely because your intelligence reports indicated it would be attacked. I needed to observe Zephyrian military capabilities and decision-making processes firsthand." General Vextar's eyes blazed with anger as the full scope of the deception became clear to him. The battle. The capture. It was all planned. "The capture was planned," Kate confirmed. "The heroic resistance of the crew and the casualties they suffered were entirely real. They fought bravely and many died believing they were protecting a civilian transport. They never knew their sacrifice was part of a larger strategy." Kate's voice carried genuine respect and sadness as she spoke of the fallen crew members. Even in the midst of revealing her deception, she honored those who had died without knowing the true nature of their mission. "You allowed yourself to be captured to spy on us?" the general asked, his military mind already working through the implications. "I allowed myself to be captured to learn about you," Kate corrected. "Your tactics, your technology, your strategic thinking, and most importantly, your assumptions about human capabilities. In 5 days, I have gathered more actionable intelligence about the Zephyrian Empire than our analysts collected in months of conventional espionage." She gestured toward the recording equipment that had been documenting their conversations. "Every word spoken in my presence has been memorized and analyzed. Your interrogation techniques, your security protocols, your casual discussions about fleet movements and strategic plans, all of it." General Vextar realized with growing horror that his confidence in human ignorance and inferiority had led him to discuss classified information freely in front of what he thought was a powerless prisoner. "You have been listening to our operational discussions," he said, the statement barely a question. "For 5 days," Kate confirmed. "Did you know that humans have excellent hearing? And that some of us have spent years studying your language and culture? You discussed fleet positions, supply line vulnerabilities, attack schedules, and strategic assessments, as if I were a piece of furniture, Commander." Thexnall looked sick as he realized how much classified information they had, unknowingly revealed to one of humanity's top military commanders. But Kate was not finished. "Most importantly, I learned about your fundamental misunderstanding of human military capabilities and resolve. You believe Earth has 50 combat vessels. The actual number is closer to 800. with more being completed every week. General Vextar's expression darkened further. 800 ships? Impossible. Your intelligence is based on outdated information and wishful thinking, Kate said. You underestimated human industrial capacity, our technological advancement, and our determination to defend our home world. This war will not be the easy conquest you expected. As if summoned by her words, a low alarm began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lights flashed red, and urgent announcements in Zephyrian began broadcasting over the ship's communication system. Kate listened to the announcements with obvious understanding, her expression shifting to one of satisfaction. It seems my colleagues have arrived right on schedule. General Vextar spun toward the nearest communication panel. The voice reports confirmed his worst fears. Human warships were emerging from hyperspace around their position. Ships that were larger and more advanced than any in Zephyrian intelligence reports. The transport ship was bait, he said, the full scope of the trap finally becoming clear to him. The transport ship was bait, Kate agreed. And while you were congratulating yourselves on an easy victory, Earth's most advanced stealth ships were tracking your every movement. They have been following this fleet since the moment you captured me. The alarms grew louder as more reports came in. The human fleet was not just larger than expected. It was surrounding the Zephyrian ships with tactical precision that demonstrated sophisticated planning and coordination. What do you want? General Vextar asked finally, his tactical mind already recognizing that his position had become hopeless. Kate leaned back in her restraints with the calm confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. I want you to understand that this war is over before it truly began. Human space is not defenseless territory waiting to be conquered. It is the home of a species that is far more dangerous than you realized. Paused as another wave of alarms indicated that the human ships were powering up weapons, systems that registered as more powerful than anything in Zephyrian technology databases. I also want you to release my fellow prisoners immediately and prepare to discuss the terms of your surrender. General, Vextar stared at her for a long moment, his warrior's pride warring with his survival instincts and his duty to his crew. You planned this entire operation around getting captured, he said finally, a note of professional respect creeping into his voice despite his anger. I planned this operation around understanding my enemy, Kate replied. The capture was simply the most efficient method of gathering the intelligence I needed. And now, General, I suggest you prepare to learn what humans are truly capable of when defending their home. The sound of weapon locks engaging echoed through the ship as the human fleet completed its encirclement. Admiral Catherine Miller, no longer a prisoner but very much in command of the situation, waited calmly for General Vextar to make his decision. The war that the Zephyrian Empire thought would be an easy conquest was about to become their greatest military disaster, orchestrated by a single human who had the courage to walk into the enemy's grasp and turn their own confidence against them.